All right, everybody, welcome back to the Federalist Papers. Today we are reading Federalist number 7, if I can find it. I was on the wrong one. Federalist number 7. The same subject continued concerning dangers from dissension between states. Authored by Alexander Hamilton. To the people of the state of New York, it is sometimes asked with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? It would be a full answer to this question to say precisely the same inducements which have at different times deluged in blood in all nations in the world. But unfortunately for us, the question admits of a more particular answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. Territorial disputes have at all times been found on the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth have sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There still are discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have heretofore had serious and animated discussions concerning the right of the land, which were ungranted at the time of the Revolution, and which unusually went under the name of Crown lands. The states within the limits of those colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the Crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all the parts of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain, till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. This, it has been said, was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make secessions to the United States for the benefits of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as under the continuation of the Union to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute and would create others on the same subject. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by secession at least, if not by any interior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the state which made the secession on a principle of federal compromise would be apt, when the motive of the grant had ceased, to reclaim the lands as a reversion. The other states would no doubt insist on the proportion by right of representation. Their argument would be that a grant once made could not be revoked, and that the justice of participating in territory acquired or secured by the joint efforts of the Confederacy remained undiminished. If, contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to share of this common stock, there would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as to the proper rule of appointment. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose, and as they would affect the opposite interest of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible to a pacific adjustment. In the wide field of Western Territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions. Without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties, to reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the land at Wyoming admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania, but Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction with that determination. Nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it, till, by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure to the conduct of that state. She no doubt sincerely believed herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquiesce, acquiesce. I don't know what that word is.
Acquiesce.
I've never seen it spelled like that. Maybe I'm just losing it. Like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance and determination to their disadvantage. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transaction which attended the progress of the controversy between the state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced, as well from states not interested as far from which are interested in the claim, and can attest to the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed. Had the state attempted to assert its right by force, two motives preponderated in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states, who had obtained grants of land under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember the state than to establish their own pretensions. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. New Jersey and Rhode Island, upon all occasions, discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont, and Maryland, till alarmed by the appearance of a connection between Canada and that state, entered deeply into the same views. These, being small states, saw with an unfriendly eye the perspective of the growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes which would be likely to embroil the state with each other, if it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The state less favorably circumstanced would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantage of their more fortunate neighbors. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of these circumstances. We should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent sovereignties consulting a distinct interest. The spirit of enterprise, which characterizes the commercial part of America, has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them on the other, would naturally lead to outrage and these reprisals and wars. The opportunities which some states would have of rendering others tributary to them by commercial regulations would be impatiently submitted to by their tributary states. The relative situations of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey would afford an example of this kind. New York, from the necessity of revenue, must lay duties on her importations. A great part of these duties must be paid by the inhabitants of the two other states. In the capacity of consumers of what we import, New York would neither be willing nor able to forego this advantage. Her citizens would not consent that a duty paid by them should be remitted in favor of the citizens of her neighbors. Nor would it be practicable, if there were not this impediment in the way, to distinguish the customers in their own market. Would Connecticut and New Jersey long submit to be taxed by New York for her exclusive benefit? Should we be long permitted to remain in the quiet and undisturbed enjoyment of the metropolis, from the possessions of which we derived an advantage so odious to our neighbors and, in their opinion, so oppressive? Should we be able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the one side and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? These are questions that temerity alone will answer in the affirmative. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. The apportionment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterward would be alike productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? There is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from real objection. These, as usual, would be exaggerated by their adverse interests in the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them, either less impressed with the importance of national credit, or because their citizens have little, if any, immediate interest in the question, feel indifference, if not a repugnance, to repay the domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of distribution. Others of them, a numerous body of whose citizens are creditors to the public beyond proportion of the state in a total amount of national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable and effective provisions. The procrastinations of the former would excite the resentments of the latter. The settlement of the rule would, in the meantime, be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delay. The citizens of the states interested would clamor, foreign power would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands, and the peace of the states would be hazarded to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still, there is great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be declined to a revision, which was likely to end in an increase in their own encumbrances. Their refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions, not to be embraced with avidity, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagements would not be ground for bitter discussion and altercation. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payments in other parts of some of the states would result from the diversity of other causes. The real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances, accidental disorders in the management of the government, and, in addition to the rest, the reluctance with which men commonly part with money for purposes that have outlived the exigencies which produce them, and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. Delinquencies, from whatever causes, would be productive of complaints, recrimination, and quarrels. There is, perhaps, nothing more likely to disturb the tranquillity of nations than their being bound to mutual contribution for any common object that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. For it is an observation, as true as it is trite, that there is nothing men differ so readily about than the payment of money. Laws in violation of private contracts, as they amount to aggressions on the right of those states whose citizens are injured by them, may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that the more liberal, the more equitable spirit would preside over the legislations of the individual states hereafter. If unrestrained by an additional checks than we have heretofore seen in too many instances, disgracing their several codes. We have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut in consequence of the enormities perpetuated by the legislature of Rhode Island. And we reasonably infer that, in similar cases, under other circumstances, a war, not of parchment, but of sword, would chastise such atrocious breaches of moral obligation and social justice. The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states or confederacies and different foreign nations and the effects of the situation upon the peace of the whole have been sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. From the view they have exhibited of the part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn: that America, if not connected at all, or only on the feeble tie of a simple league, offensive and defensive, would, by their operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars, and by the destructive contentions of the parts to which she was divided, would be likely to become prey to the artifices and machinations of power equally the enemies equally the enemies of them all. Divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that either hates or fears us. Publius. All right, that was Federalist number 7. I don't really have anything to say about it other than it's what was said in Federalist number 6, that we are stronger together and any nation will seek to divide us that seeks to defeat us. I think that's true. I think it's kind of miraculous how these issues, we're seeing the effects of them today, and how all of this was pretty much correct. All of these were right, except for we were talking about earlier how we said that the states would keep the other states in line. That one was a little bit off, although that remains to be seen. We're going to see how that plays out here in probably the next 10, 20 years. Maybe this year, I don't know. But the point is that all of these four men, Hamilton, John Jay, Madison, and who was the other one? I'll tell you. Oh, just the three of them. Okay. Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison. They were Nostradamuses, basically. They predicted it. They called it so far, at least. We're only on 7, so we'll see where it goes. But so far, I mean, everything they warned about is almost everything they warned about is happening nonetheless. But the framework they put forward suggests that we should be able to remedy it. So I guess we will find out. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Excuse me. And we will see you next time.